I want to steelman the postmoderns, right? And then talk about what the competition really is here, okay? The postmoderns have, in my opinion, one point. And it's a good one, but it's one point. It's not the basis for field after field. The one point is that we are humans, and we have only our perception as the basis for everything we think. And even to the extent that you might have tools that would allow you to see something what we would claim is objectively, your interaction with those tools is still subjective, right?
And this is true.
It is true, and it results in a lot of places where bias leaks into what we believe, even where it is supposed to be absolutely analytical and rigorous and devoid of all of the things that might bias us. It can't be totally, right? Now, here's the problem with that. So that's the Steelman version. Perception is between you and the world. You can't escape that, and because of that, bias is impossible to stamp out completely. And I believe that that's accurate. However, if you were going to try to stamp out bias, the number one tool you would want in your arsenal, arguably the only tool you need, is science. Because what science does, the entire reason that it exists, the entire reason that it has beaten every other system, is that it will tell you what's true in spite of your bias. Now, you have to do it right. If you have a corrupt system, if you have, monetary corruption that has influenced, how quote unquote science gets done because it's only the people who succeed at some sort of non-scientific phenomenon like grant writing.
Or you have a repeat of a good old boy network sort of thing with peer review.
Yeah, you can have all kinds of things interfere with proper science. But if you can do the science properly and you can be vigilant about stamping out the things that cause science not to be done properly, then science will force you to discover the things that you don't intuitively believe, right? That's what it does. And so, yes, the postmoderns are right. Bias is a serious problem. What do you do about it? You science it, right?
Science it.
To the extent that your science is influenced by things that it shouldn't be and is therefore biased, what's the solution to that? Better science. More science. It's science. That's the answer to postmodernism, and it always has been. So
I'm gonna add. I'm gonna say, okay, I think if I have to pick one, it's gonna be science. But I want two things. I mean, I want more. I want more than that, but I want science and I want art. Because art allows you to view the world through other people's lenses. And, postmodernism, at least its modern, crazy, corrupt instantiations, are specifically demanding of us that we not see the world through other people's eyes. That if we claim to be able to, then we are somehow revealing our own bigotry. But art, especially narrative art, especially fiction in whatever form, but 2D art, 3D art, any of it, also just allows you to stand in someone else's footsteps and see. And science does this in a very different way. And if I have to pick one, I pick science. But science and art together are going to be an incredibly potent rejoinder to this movement. And therefore, I am not too surprised to find the shutdown STEM movement and the very wide number of organizations that we are hearing from and seeing in the arts that are being gone after by this movement. They're being targeted.
So I like this. I still think it's the science that narrowly corrects for the bias, but the fact is, nobody reads scientific papers. I mean, scientists do right in their own field, and sometimes they read a little farther afield than that. But what moves the world is the conclusions that you come up with, the counterintuitive things that you discover through this process that then get incorporated into something beautiful and intuitive and provocative enough to capture people's attention, which tends to be, it's not even always narrative.
No, I said it's easier to point to with narrative, but it's not just narrative. 2D art, 3D art.
2D art.
Yeah.
Or, I was thinking about
just staring at an amazing sculpture. Even an abstract one, it's easier to do if it's a non-abstract sculpture. But you learn something about a different mind, about a different human being's mind by walking around some piece of art that's been created that is the product of another human mind.
And not even necessarily mind. The mind is an interface, and sometimes the mind is the point, and its content is the point, and that's what you discover. But even something like, there are some of these images of sculptures that very effectively capture the finest fabric flowing as if in the wind, and it's so compelling. Or there's a famous sculpture with somebody's hand on somebody's leg and the way the fingers depress the skin of the person. And the point is, it's so compelling that it actually reveals something. How could you render something soft out of stone, right? So even that counterpoint tells you something about the way the world works. Or I'm frequently stunned by what is revealed by just simply changing one parameter of something you can observe yourself. Like stop motion reveals certain things, or the way, if you look at clouds and mountains and the way they interact in a time lapse. And the thing is, you can read in a textbook all you want that the atmosphere functions as a fluid, right? But until you see until you see what the mountain does to the clouds as they move around it, it's like what we used to say, an enzyme is a catalyst.
Not really.
That's
incomplete at best.
It's a catalyst in the same way that a factory is a catalyst, right? A factory is a catalyst for making cars. Right.
And you can, so having time lapse is obviously a fairly modern phenomenon, but I think also art has probably revealed what is possible and opened up technological worlds very often. So the example that came to mind when you were talking, that I imagine there's history written on this and I don't know it, but pointillism, 19th to 20th century, 19th, 20th century, turn of the century art form in which dots are used to convey great precision in vast scenes, seems to presage the idea of pixels. Like, the idea that you can actually reveal things through points, was that in people's heads in Da Vinci's time? I don't know. It might have been Da Vinci's head because so much was, but
my art history is weak. But the Impressionists predate formal pointillism.
I think so. Yeah.
And I think what you're getting at is the retina is actually it's the inverse of pixels. It's it's just as a camera sensor would be.
Yeah.
And there is this interesting duality. It's not the duality of man, but there is an interesting duality between the continuous and the discrete interpretation of the world. And there are certain things that are simply discrete, and there are other things that are continuous. And then there are many things which do not fall wholly in one or the other category. And therefore, one needs to spend time borrowing from the alternative in order to see what it is that you were missing, what's in your blind spot, because you had looked at it as discrete when in fact it was continuous at some level.
So, and this is science fiction serves this purpose as well. Like scientific investigations have gotten ideas from things that have been written in science fiction, in part because what science fiction reveals, what art may reveal in other forms, is maybe the categories we are currently using aren't right, or maybe the boundaries aren't quite where we thought they were, or maybe the boundaries were where we thought they were, but those boundaries are moving because other things are changing. And art can allow you to live in that alternative space for a little bit and consider it, and sometimes like, nope, actually not right. Interesting to spend some time there, but that's not right. And sometimes it can cause people to go, actually, I think we do need an update or a radical change. Maybe we need to actually build a whole new foundation over here with a new kind of science, because the categories we were using, I'm also not up to date on the various older versions of what the world is made of, but it turns out that fire, earth, water, and air are not the basal elements of life, right?
Right.
So
it sort of hints at the periodic table, but it didn't get there. It's got the wrong things on it.
It didn't get there, and you could not just do a brick in the wall model from fire, earth, water, and air to get to the periodic table. You actually needed to go all the way back in the decision tree to the question: what is it made of? What are the fundamentals? And rebuild from there.